May 10th, 2023. The day had started like any other, but for me, it was the beginning of something far worse, a breaking point I hadn't seen coming. I've always been a man of strong convictions, especially when it comes to politics, but the tension between my daughter and me, because of those very beliefs, had grown to a point where we could barely talk without erupting. I'm 65, with two daughters, Alicia, 35, and Mary, 32. Their mother and I divorced when the girls were still in middle school, and for the last 15 years, I've been with my partner Janice. We've never married, but she's been a constant in my life. The girls? They lived with me full-time after middle school, up until they moved out as adults. But things between us started to shift as the years went on. There was always an undercurrent of tension that kept bubbling up, especially when we talked about politics. Janice and I, our views don't line up with the girls at all. This, at first, was just background noise, but eventually, it became the source of every argument, every disagreement. It all reached its boiling point a few years ago, when tensions finally exploded. It was Christmas, a time supposed to be filled with warmth and love, but instead, Mary said something that rubbed Janice the wrong way. The air thickened with discomfort until Mary, upset, stormed out. Alicia stayed, but the rest of the day felt off. The cracks were already there, widening with each passing moment. Janice and I made a decision that night: Mary wouldn't be welcome in our home anymore. I still kept in touch with her, though, meeting her alone or with Alicia. Time passed, and I thought things might heal, but nothing got better. Then came Alicia's birthday breakfast. The day was supposed to be about us, enjoying each other's company. We'd agreed to avoid the topic of politics, knowing well it was a landmine. The restaurant was mostly empty, with just a couple seated at another table. Then something on the TV caught my attention, and before I knew it, I made a comment. It was a mistake, I admit it now. Alicia exploded. She started ranting, her voice rising with anger, not giving an inch. I told her to stop, but it was as if she couldn't hear me. You brought it up, she snapped. And just like that, the atmosphere shifted, suffocating any chance for a peaceful moment. The man sitting at the other table, his words felt like a punch to the gut. He turned toward Alicia and started yelling, calling her words stupid, demanding she shut up. I agreed with him. What was I thinking? I walked out, muttering a half-hearted happy birthday as I left her there with a stranger, a man who continued to rant. Alicia was left speechless, furious, her face flushed with humiliation. She said she felt unsafe. I left her alone. But was it wrong to walk out? Perhaps. But the fact remains, she could have stopped. She didn't, and the situation spiraled from there. I tried to explain my side, but the rift between us only grew. Now, she barely speaks to me, only showing up on rare occasions like birthdays or Father's Day, and even then, never at either of our homes. She moved, though she won't tell me where. It's local, but that's all I know. I see Mary more often, but she's reluctant to get involved, caught between her sister's issues with me and the fractured relationship we have. Am I the one to blame? Am I wrong for holding firm to my beliefs while trying to hold on to my family? At first, we tried to keep things civil. We would debate, even argue, but it was never anything more than words. I thought there was hope in that, the chance to bridge the gap. For a brief moment, I believed that we could talk through our differences and maybe, just maybe, find some common ground. I even got him to admit something he wouldn't have dared say aloud otherwise. You see, during one conversation, we were talking about abortion. I knew where he stood, conservative, right-wing, pro-life. But somehow, when we spoke logically, calmly, and reasonably about it, he couldn't deny that, in some cases, abortion should be allowed. I pressed him on it. Congratulations, I said, that makes you pro-choice. He didn't have an answer for that. I almost laughed. In that brief exchange, I could see the cracks in his armor. Maybe it was the buzzwords, the media he consumed, the one-sided narratives that had muddled his mind. They'd pulled him into a world that felt more like fantasy than reality. And Janice? She was right there beside him, reinforcing every wrong thought, every misplaced belief. They lived in their own little bubble, shut off from the real world, and heaven forbid anyone remind them of that. They had stopped attending family events. A lot of it, of course, was because of Janice's medical condition, but I knew there was more. They were avoiding us. Avoiding me. I couldn't even send a simple message anymore without it feeling like a chore, like I was the one intruding. At some point, I just turned off my notifications. The comments kept coming, relentless, but the truth was, I didn't want to deal with it anymore. And yet, as much as I wanted to shut everything down, I couldn't leave it like that. I couldn't just let the words sit there without offering some closure, without giving some truth back. There had been too many comments, too many people who understood, who saw the situation clearly without needing all the details. It made me feel not alone. But in the end, what was I going to do about it in real life? Nothing, really. Nothing but keep up a facade, a surface-level relationship. It was all I could manage. When my dad would tell my sister that he missed me, it struck me as if he had no idea what had really happened. After all our conversations, after all the hurt, how could he still be this blind? I was done trying to fix it. If he didn't get it by now, he never would. So why keep pretending? Why keep putting myself through this? And yet, I couldn't cut him off completely. Why? Hell if I knew. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was something else, but there was a part of me that just couldn't let go. The screenshots I posted, the words I shared, they speak for themselves. The first set, from November 3rd, 2018, still stings. His response when I told him how hurt I was, that I had been abandoned, alone with a stranger who was yelling at me, his reply felt empty, cold. I didn't mean to make you feel sad or abandoned, he wrote. Is that what you meant? As if he didn't understand the gravity of what had happened. The next exchange came on October 28, 2020. His message was simple, almost too simple. You know, you can reach out too. I haven't heard from you, so I figured you wanted space. Space? Was that really the issue? We hadn't spoken because he had made it clear that I wasn't welcome in his life, not in his home, not at family events, and certainly not on my birthday when he left me alone in a restaurant, abandoned and humiliated by a stranger. That was the turning point for me. That was the moment I realized I needed help, that I couldn't continue like this. And yet, even then, he couldn't see it. He kept pushing hypothetical situations, talking about a civil war that would tear us apart. He didn't get it. His politics meant more to him than I did, than our relationship did. And when I finally spoke up, when I finally stopped being quiet about it, he didn't like it. Not at all. Guess that means you're good with it, too, I told him, after he insisted that he wasn't going to push me into anything I wasn't ready for. His response, so dry, so nonchalant, made it clear, this was it. This was the last conversation we would have. And when he said, I'm not going to push you, I couldn't help but feel the finality of it. This wasn't about reconciliation anymore. This was about him protecting his beliefs, no matter the cost. So, I finally said it, why would I want to pursue anything with someone who thinks politics are more important than their own daughter? That was the truth. And it hurt. It hurt more than anything he could have said. And then, just like that, another text came. He sent me a photo of himself and Janice with none other than Mike Pence. Of course, he knew what that would do to me. He knew I didn't want to hear about this, didn't want to see it, yet there it was, a last-ditch effort to get under my skin. When I called him out on it, his excuse was laughable. It was for Mike Pence's wishes, he claimed, as if that made any difference. But I saw it for what it was. It was childish, petty, and cruel. He knew what I felt, knew the history between us, and yet, he still chose to send it. That was the final straw. The line was drawn. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. So I told him, do not contact me again. I didn't want it to end like this. But sometimes, you have to choose yourself.